Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, glad everybody is here who is physically here today, as well as everyone out there in our live stream. Alhamdulillah, that we're blessed that we can be together and do something together as a community, worshiping Allah Ta'ala and remembering the message of the Quran and the message of Islam. Last week, we talked about the meaning of ummah, of community in Islam, one of the fundamental foundational aspects. And I'll refresh your memory just a little bit that we've been talking about the tools that we use that are adaptive for Islam under changing circumstances in the world. And so without doubt, change is a real phenomenon all of us experience, negatively and positively. But in order to have and to foster positive change, we have to foster a unified identity within the community. So the community has to be a community that fosters this positive change. Religious communities all over the world are reacting to change in a negative way. They respond to the threats of the modern world with extremism, fundamentalism, division and strife, violence, and of course, hatred of each other, division into sects and groups, all kinds of negative ways. People isolate themselves from things they fear or don't understand, and they isolate themselves from people who make different choices than they make because they don't want to recognize the diverse options that are available to people. We want to pretend that always and ever there's one option for everybody. That's my way. And so that's where we're at today in the Muslim Ummah, but everywhere in the world. And so last week we talked about the Ummah of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. Allah said in the Quran, in hadhi ummatukum ummatun wahida. This community of yours, O prophets and messengers, plural, is one community. That is, the ummah of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is in continuity with the communities of all the prophets and messengers reaching back to Adam, basically. So there is a continuity of community. And everyone who is alive today and everyone who will be joining us on the face of the earth before Judgment Day, before the end of the world, is part of the Ummah of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. That is, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, like all of the previous messengers, was sent to his Ummah, that is, his contemporaries, the people of his time and space and age. And his time and age, that is, as we said, Asri Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that is today. So everyone is invited in the dawah today to join in and follow the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. That's an open invitation in our time. And so that is inclusive of everyone in the world. And as Muslims in particular, who have chosen and responded to the call of the da'wah or message of Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, all of us are members of one ummah, along with the Sahaba, the companions, and the Tabi'een, their followers, and the وَمَنْ تَبِعُهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ, as we say, and all the generations who subsequently followed them, following in their righteous conduct until Judgment Day. So all of us are one ummah. And I'm pointing that out to dispel the misunderstanding that people have. They think the ummah is contemporary Muslims only, for example. Some people think the ummah are citizens of Muslim majority states, for example, maybe a state that has a 90% Muslim population. And so people have a limiting idea of what the ummah is. When we talk about the universal aspect of the ummah, it's to show that there's no alternative today. But in front of us are a series of choices, which every one of them has negative consequences. But the tools that are presented to human beings to adapt spiritually to our present day crises, that is found within the ummah of da'wah, of the message of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the purpose he was sent, was to give us tools by which to respond to our current events, situations in which we find ourselves. So there are a couple of beautiful verses in chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran. وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَعْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. There shall grow out of you, or out from among you, plural, a community, an ummah, who invite unto all that is good, enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong. It is they who shall be successful, who shall have falah, which is salvation and success in this life and in eternity. And then there's a second verse, a few verses after that, 110. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You, plural, are indeed the best community brought forth for the good of humanity. You enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong, and you have faith in God, in Almighty Allah Ta'ala. Tu'minuna billah. You have an active faith and trust in God. And so these verses are so similar, and they're only a couple of verses apart, 104 and 110. So there's an important principle in the Quran. There's no repetition. The Quran, all the time, you hear the same words and phrases, even whole verses are almost identical or even identical. But in fact, each one has special meaning in its context. It's not simply a repetition, as you might assume after you examine it, because why would God waste words that not required? There has to be a reason behind everything, but it's a challenge to us to sort of find those reasons. So the first verse, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ, there shall arise, or you could say there ought to arise, there must come out of or grow out of you together, an ummah, a community of people. And we talk about ummah is related to imam, leadership, modeling, leadership, role model. So Abraham is an ummah by himself. He is an ummah. So he is the father of multiple communities, but he has within himself all of the attributes which are worthy of people following and imitating. So he's a source of modeling for us, or you might say today, mentoring for people. And so, so this is sort of a challenge, that there should be among you, and there shall be among you, a community that arises, that comes forth out from people. So it's, when it says you, it's plural. So in English today, we use always the second person plural. We never use thou and thee, the second person singular anymore. So in the Quran, of course, it uses both clearly. And so when it uses the second person plural, that means it's addressing 3 or more persons. So the verse is addressing the plurality of Muslims who are receiving the message, and it's addressing them that out of them should grow a group of people, a community. So they're already a community. They already believe in Allah. They believe in Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him. Allah is addressing them. And he may also be addressing the greater humanity, our generation, our asr, our era. That's true. That out of them should grow a community. But this means that our leadership activity should come out of a coalescing of people within the community who have received the message. That is, they're responding in an active way to that message, providing leadership for humanity. And this is made clear here. تَعْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنَ الْمُفْلِحِينَ. This community will be identified by the fact that they are active in pursuing values, clarifying values for people. Ma'ruf and munkar. Ma'ruf from al-urf, what is learned and what is acceptable within a community of people, what we would call today community standards, is ma'ruf. It's recognizable as ethical, moral behavior. And so it's a community that leads by standards of behavior. And the community as a whole recognize those standards of behavior. يَعْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. So they are commanding what is recognizable and acceptable in community standards, and they prohibit or forbid or advise against that which is munkar. Nakira means what is not acceptable, what is not recognizable as proper behavior or conduct. So a munkar is that which is obviously in contradiction to the community's standards or ethics or understanding. And so a community that is setting standards, that is advising people in the way to respond to things that happen in the world. And so this verse is very dynamic, that out of a lot of people is coming something active, something that is organized, and it's organized by value leadership, that we are setting a standard, leading by example, other human beings, leading in a way that is recognizable, that people can accept. That's different than imposing upon people your standards or your beliefs. So it's working within a community to form a consensus that arises out of a community in a natural way. This is sometimes the way our local communities here in the United States and other places work. We don't have the power to impose a set of beliefs and standards on anyone. And if you try to do that in any way extreme, you would have a huge negative reaction. So the way that you react to change is by value leadership within the community and talking to the community from that which is recognizable to them, which they can understand and accept, and gradually leading them to adapt to a new set of circumstances that perhaps in the past they were confused about. And so it arises with consensus in a natural way rather than being imposed by some kind of authority, like I am the imam, do what I say, etc. And that doesn't usually work because people aren't familiar. They're in a set of situations, like all of us can probably think right now, 3 or 4 big things that are new that we did not like and that happened to us without our input and cause us to be confused as individuals and families and communities. We don't know how to respond to rapid change and unpleasant circumstances. And so if someone were to come to us and impose upon us their set of solutions without any kind of input or discussion, let alone, as I said, coming to a consensus within the community, then we would probably react toward that, as people tend to do. And so out of even our local community and nationally and internationally, consensus happens in a slow, organic way, rather than someone being the Pope, I'm the Ayatollah, or I'm the Pope or whatever, and I command, therefore you obey my commands. And so that's the way that change happens in the community from one era to the other. Eventually, these become consensus. And consensus as a form of ijma, which is a legal source, when there is an absolute consensus in the community, that's something actually very, very rare. But sort of the majority consensus, the inclination of the majority, and the overwhelming assent of the majority, and perhaps the silence of minority viewpoints that are not actively in opposition or still are very insignificant, that indicates kind of a building of a gradual consensus that arises, though it may never reach absolute consensus, which is 100% no opposition at all. That is something very rare. A lot of the Muslim scholars in classical times held the opinion that it's impossible to have an absolute consensus today. Of course, they were talking 700 years ago. Is it possible? I would never say impossible, but it's something that doesn't happen very often, that you could have the entire agreement, the entire Muslim community on a new matter. But there are things that are very close to being a consensus because they're modern issues, and over the decades, the vast majority of scholarship and authority have coalesced around responses to different issues. And some of those are involving modern technology, modern medicine, areas that were unknown before, like organ donation. There's a near consensus on that kind of issue, saving a human life through organ donation, something that was absolutely unknown in the past. And the first response, the gut reaction of most educated Muslims when organ donation first came to light was that that's something prohibited because it involves mutilation of the body. But the educated consensus was developed through expert opinion and because of the huge response of human beings and their needs, that saving a life in Islam is a principle that is absolutely stronger than the idea of protecting a dead body from mutilation. Since a dead body on the battlefield, people would mutilate the enemy's body to disrespect their humanity. And so that is forbidden in Islam. And to disrespect Khalq Allah, the creation of God, which is the human. And so that was to protect the honor of a human being who is now helpless, a body. And of course, but the principle of saving one human life is much more powerful than the idea of leaving a body intact and not violating a body. So of course, in all of Islamic history, Muslim scholars have agreed that doing an operation on a living body is not mutilation. Say, I can save you by operating on you, but that's involving some harm to your body, but the good outweighs the harm of an operation. And so then when you look at it, obviously, saving a human life by operating on a deceased person who is not living is even stronger than operating on a living person to save a life. And so that consensus arose over time. And so I don't believe it's impossible to have a consensus or a near consensus, but those things happen gradually, and there is not any way of imposing that at any particular time. Even though I may wish to impose my view, there's no way of actually practically doing that. So we look at that verse once again. It's talking about وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ, there shall arise from among you, there shall grow out from among you an active group who are working for positive change. Their identity is unified because they are focusing on values, al-khair. They are calling people to every source of good, and khair means positive change. Whenever there is a crisis or situation, change happens, there are potential choices be made, good and bad. Better, the better is, what do they say? So, worse, bad, worse, good, better, best. There are a variety of changes, and you don't always get to choose between two absolute things. And that's illustrated in the Quran frequently, such as, for example, wine. So Allah said about wine that it contains benefit for people as well as harm, but the harm outweighs clearly the benefit. And so we weigh potential sources of good and bad. And so a da'watu ila al-khair, calling people to that which is good in their physical life, in the contemporary world, for their spiritual life, for their salvation in the world to come. All of that is al-khair, or good, a positive response. And that is al-amr ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, that is calling people to a clear set of values that are recognizable by the community standard. And so at one point in the community, protecting the dead body from mutilation, that was obviously the community standard of decency, showing our civilization, showing the beauty and wisdom of Islam. And the idea of mutilating a dead body was reprehensible. But because of a da'wah ila al-khair, a summons of humanity to good, to values in changing circumstances, we can see when organ donation from a dead body to save a living person actually embodies our positive values of khair. Saving a life, saving one soul is like saving the whole world. And in no way are we disrespecting a body or mutilating a corpse or denying. In fact, we are enhancing the value of human life, not denying and rejecting the value of a human life, which would be the disrespect of a corpse or mutilation of a corpse. And then we look at the second verse. It's apparently in the past tense. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. You wouldn't translate in English that you were, but it means you became and are the ummah of khair ummatin. So you are. So when we said before, adawatu ilal khair, calling people, inviting them, summoning people to good. And then kuntum khayra ummatin. When you put the khair first, that means the best among communities, the community of good, that because it's a community representing positive change, it has a superiority among other alternative communities. And it's not because you guys are the best, because you're white or you're black or you're Muslim, so you're obviously better than Christians or Jews or whatever, or, you know, racial or national, or even like my religion is the best religion, you know, alhamdulillah, etc. That's not what it means. So it says, kuntum khayra ummatin, you are the best community, ukhrijat linnas, brought forth for the sake of humanity, for human beings, annas, plural, so the plurality of human beings. So as much as you are a community that works for the sake of humanity, bringing good to all people, then you are the best community. So the superiority of one group of people or another is not in their race or nation, or, hey, we're Muslims, you guys aren't, so we're obviously best. But the superiority is one group is working to spread positive values, to help people adapt to a bunch of, you know, bad situations and confusing choices, help them to make right choices and provide good outcomes for humanity, and that's all people. And so you have that universal approach of bringing a message which is positive change for people. That makes you, as a group, better than some other group. That is, your methodology is better and your outcomes are better. So if I said, you know, oh, you know, I have a deadly, you know, cancer. Can you recommend some medical group I should go to? And they say, you know, go to, you know, Macy or Massey Center or whatever group, doctors and professionals who have technology and have research, et cetera. And I'm sending you to them because they're at VCU, and obviously Virginia is the best state, and VCU is the best university in Virginia, so you should go to Massey. That's not in my interest whatsoever. If I got, say, fatal cancer, that is not my interest. So my interest is you should go to that group of people because they have your best interest at heart. They have the best information, techniques, experience, tools available to give you the best chance of a positive outcome. Go to them. It just so happens that they're here in Richmond, Virginia. But if they were in Rochester, Minnesota, by all means, go over there or wherever. And so it's not a superiority like people think, because we all want to be the best, but it's got to be something measurable by human beings. What is the Ummah offering us? So if I'm in America or Asia or Africa or Europe, what are you guys bringing to me that's going to make my life better? I have a limited amount of time to make a decision. A lot of choices I make have bad consequences, sometimes irreversible. I don't have a lot of time to waste. What are you guys offering? What are you bringing? And so a community of positive change, a community that has an identity about civilizational values, bringing these things to humanity, that is the group of people that, you know, I'm interested in. And that would be something that you can measure, not, oh, Islam is the best because that's my group. And obviously I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't think it was good, right? That's not, it's not within anyone's interest to simply accept something because I think it's good, any more than I would go to a doctor just because somebody likes that guy. But I need to have some measurable way of identifying an ummah and a message, an ummah that embodies obviously an identity that's unified, or fostering unity among people, a community of positive change. And so you are part of this positive ummah because you're working for the betterment of humanity in an unselfish way, not based on yourself and your ego, but on a positive outcome for the majority of people. تَعْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. And so your message is clarifying positive and negative values in our asr, in our time, in the time in which is our field of action, the time or age in which we live. We're offered a certain set of options based on our circumstances, and that's the only set of choices we have in our lifetime, in our time and place. And so if you're talking to me about options that were available to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and the companions 14 centuries ago, that's good information. But that's not what is going to help me right now. You have to be offering me tools by which I can adapt to the set of circumstances I have here and have a positive outcome. And that positive outcome has to be in dunya, in this world, and akhirah, in the world to come, so that we could be among the muflihun, those who have success and salvation now and in eternity. And it's after talking about these positive values, then it reiterates, وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, and your faith is in an active faith in Allah Ta'ala, in God Almighty, dedicating our faith. We're motivated by faith in the divine attributes. When we say Allah, it means the set of divine attributes. Every perfect attribute of which we can conceive has its source in Allah, and Allah has all of those attributes, and there are no other set of positive attributes outside of God. So outside of God, everything is negativity. That is, it's a lack. So where in the world is perfect knowledge? It doesn't exist in this world. We have corruptions of knowledge. Where is perfect good, perfect love, perfect, mercy? Where is absolute power being used for absolute good in this life? Nowhere. All of those things, absolute good, knowledge, perfect love, mercy, those are embodied in Allah Ta'ala alone. They are found in God Almighty alone. Those are the eternal divine attributes, the sifat al-uluhiyya. And so iman means trusting in those divine attributes and then bringing those to bear in our world to produce a positive outcome. So when we are bringing divine attributes to bear to human problems, it's always going to be that we are directing the good that we can understand and applying it in the way that we have the ability to apply it in the set of circumstances which face us. There's never going to be an absolute positive outcome in this life, because this is a world of corruption. Kul man alayha fan, everything upon the surface of the earth shall perish. It is in the process of perishing. It is corrupted. And so we bring the relative good to our circumstances, which is atafaqquh fi din, educating ourselves in the religious principles that have their source in those divine attributes, and then applying them in a rigorous way to contemporary issues. And so the ummah that we're talking about is a group of people whose identity coalesces around a positive message, which is universal. If there are Muslims who have a positive identity, which is pride in the past, or I know the seerah or the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and I'm love that and I'm proud of it. Those are good parts of the ummah. But the ummah da'wah ila al-khair, the invitation to good, has to be active in applying those principles to our time and place. That's all we have time for this evening. We'll continue, inshallah, next week. May Allah Almighty bless all of you, our families and individuals and community, and keep everyone safe and healthy.